How did you end up in Vermont after all those years at Duke and South Carolina? You didn't have any prior connection with Vermont?
No, as a matter of fact, when I moved to Vermont, I think I knew maybe one person in the entire state. In 1992, my wife, who is a psychiatrist, and I, as well as William Willimon, the dean of the Duke Chapel, the three of us were writing a book called The Search for Meaning. And the book was to have a chapter called The Longing for Community. In the summer of '92, I proposed to my wife Magdalena that we should, rather than visit Eastern Europe, she happens to be from Warsaw, Poland, let's go check out life in alpine villages in Switzerland, Austria, and northern Italy, and see if there really is a sense of community in these villages, if life is all that it's cracked up to be. And at that particular time, the last 4 years that I taught at Duke, I was actually living in Richmond, Virginia, where my wife was in private medical practice. And Richmond was basically going to hell in a handbasket. It had one of the highest homicide rates in the United States. Last year we were there were 160 homicides for 200,000 people. My wife had 3 personal friends murdered that last year. And so we were looking for an alternative and found these alpine villages very attractive. Came back to Richmond and I began having withdrawal pains. I couldn't persuade my wife to move back to Europe. She'd just gotten certified to practice medicine in this country. And so she threw out the line, find me a proxy for an alpine village in the United States, and I'll move there. Well, she didn't think I would deliver. That very night, we checked the Psychiatric Times to see if there were any interesting jobs in the tiny state of Vermont. And believe it or not, there were 3 such jobs. The next day, I wrote letters to them, said to her, sign here, FedEx them off. 3 months later, she'd been offered all 3 jobs. And so we moved. That's the story. It was basically a kind of a fantasy in search of community. It's not as though we did some exhaustive study of alternative places. We considered one and only one alternative to Richmond, Virginia, namely Vermont. We had very high expectations, and I can say in all honesty, they have been exceeded.
What year was this that you retired from Duke?
We came in the summer of 1993.
93.
So we've been here 15 years.
And you retired in 93?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, after 30 years. I took early retirement. I've taught a couple of courses up here. The first year I taught at Middlebury and then occasionally at the University of Vermont, but I've taught for over 10 years now.
I moved to Vermont 4 years ago, and I went through a similar experience as you did. At first I tried to move to Europe. I have my resume written up in Swedish and in French, and I circulated it all around Europe, but I wasn't able to get a job. It was especially difficult being over here, and I'm fluent in French and Swedish, so I had telephone interviews, but still it just didn't work out. So then I started looking on the internet and comparing states. So I was also a resident. I had a green card in Canada for a while. I lived in Montreal for 2 years. I liked their medical system. I had the carte de soleil, their health insurance card, but at that time I owned a house in New York, and getting back and forth was a problem. So then I looked on the internet and compared states, and Vermont has the number of people, voters, to each senator and representative. Your vote counts for more in Vermont.
Right.
That was one thing I thought about. And I had been coming up here for skiing and kayaking, and I thought it would be a really nice place to live. So I weighed the different possibilities, and I decided this would be a good place to retire.
So you took a more scientific approach than we did.
Yes, I had a list. I'd gone on the internet and checked every state, a lot of the states out, New Hampshire. And
so how's it worked out for you?
Well, it seems to have worked out all right so far. I'm pleased with my decision.
Good.
Having taught economics at Duke University, you're in a good position to assess the current economic situation. Will the current recession turn into a deeper depression, such as we experienced in the 1930s? Or do you expect the Obama presidency to lead to an early recovery?
Oh, Terry, I think we're in really deep trouble. I think our problems are far worse than our media, our politicians, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve Bank, the so-called experts on the global economy are leading us to believe. But I think essentially what happened is that in the 90s and then into the 2000s, that Wall Street in its wisdom created a series of very sophisticated financial instruments with mathematical models, connected them together, connected them globally, worldwide, and said it is good that we, if there is some event in China, it reverberates around the world. That is a good thing. So essentially, what we've done is created an unwieldy monster, which is coming unglued at the seams. And I don't think that the people in charge have any clue as to how to fix it. And by that I mean the Treasury under Mr. Paulson, the Federal Reserve Board. I mean, neither of them anticipated this problem, and they seem to simply be flailing at it with hundreds of billion-dollar bailout followed by bailout after bailout. We're now upwards into the trillions of dollars, and there seems to be no end in sight. And so I literally don't. There's no one that I have confidence in the Fed, the Treasury, or the American academic economists who knows how to fix this problem. And so it seems to me that it's going to continue to spiral out of control. But it's a little bit worse than that. I mean, if by some miracle it does get fixed, which I'm very pessimistic about, I don't think that Obama is going to fix it, because the people he's bringing in are all disciples of Robert Rubin, who, along with Clinton, Greenspan, Bush, were the architects, they were the cheerleaders, the promoters of the system. And so why should we feel confident this so-called new team? There's nothing new about it at all. They're the people who gave us the system that has melted down. Why should we believe that they're going to fix it? But we're it's even worse than I've said so far, because we're in a catch-22 situation. The only thing that prevented the global economy from collapsing back in July, when the price of crude oil hit $147 a barrel, and precipitating a whole inflationary crisis, a different breed of international financial crisis. The only thing that saved us from that one was the meltdown of the financial institutions. And what that did was that it dried up demand, or caused demand to drop internationally. And so if we should fix the financial crisis and demand goes back up, we're going to automatically be right back into the peak oil crisis, and that we're likely to be whipsawed back and forth. So I really don't see any easy fix way out of this dilemma, short of really rethinking the whole global system. Do we really want a global system in which we try to connect all these pieces together and then pretend that this is good, when it's utter nonsense?